Hi, we are ready to paint our Halloween painting. You are going to need white, yellow, and orange acrylic paint. You'll also need a fairly large paintbrush for this. So you don't want to use too small of a paintbrush to be painting your background. So any nice larger acrylic paintbrush will be great. You could even use a foam brush. It'll just take extra paint. What you're going to do is start off with white paint. Mine looks a little bit violet. That is just so that you can see the shape I got started with. So kind of make almost like an egg. So take your white paintbrush and just draw an egg shape with your white paint. And then now you're going to be grabbing your orange. And with that orange, I am just going to start to make circular swipes nice and loose to kind of start making more of a rounder shape. This is not going to end up being a perfect circle, but if you would like it to be a perfect moon in the background, you could easily perhaps trace a bowl upside down very lightly in pencil and create more of that perfect shape. But this is more abstract, kind of more loose and more fun. So once you have that, you're going to take yellow around the edges. Just grab some yellow and just kind of swipe that in and using circular motions. Then you're going to take a dry brush technique where you're not going to put water on your brush or rinse it off, but you are going to take a paper towel and dry it off. Then I'm going to just grab my white and I'm going to layer it and blend it with my yellow edge. To do that and to mix paint and to blend paint, you need to keep your paint wet. So paint will only blend when it's wet on wet. If my orange paint dried, this technique would not work the way it is on here. It would be layering it instead of blending it, which has its uses. But I'm going to now dry off my paintbrush. As you see, it's tacky. And to blend this in to the center, I have a clean, dry brush. And I am just going to very lightly swipe it in the way I want it to blend. So I'm actually making this a circular motion, nice curved swipes. And I don't want too much paint on my brush. When I do get too much paint, I am wiping it off. And I'm just kind of swiping. And you could practice this before you do it on your canvas, but this technique works out really, really well. And you're just going to keep drying off your brush as needed to swipe and to fade that away. If you need help on how to blend paint, there are many tutorials that you could watch first. Then what you're going to do, a nice long, with the dry brush, circular motions, I am going to make circles, one circle after another, nice and loose all the way around, almost in a starry night pattern. Then you're going to grab orange and black paint on a palette. And now we're ready to do the exterior on the background. And so you're going to grab some orange paint, and then you're just going to go ahead and draw a circular to an oval shape around that center moon. And you can keep these very, very light strokes and just keep moving it almost in a starry night pattern, which means kind of curving it, not over blending it. I'm not pressing too hard. I do have paint on my brush, but it's not too hard. And I just keep grabbing paint. Be flexible here. Allow yourself some freedom. Allow yours to look different than mine and just have fun with it. Loosen up, listen to your favorite music while you're trying to do this, and just keep grabbing your paint and just keep moving it into that shape of an oval. And you're going to just keep doing that until you reach almost the corners. Then you're going to grab black paint. And on the black paint here, I am just going to first paint them all black. And you don't need to be overly cautious. You can be free and kind of let this do its own thing. But go ahead and paint the background here all black. Keep in mind, I'm doing this on canvas, so all of my surface is still wet. If you are doing this on paper, this is going to be drying up quicker, so you may need to work faster, and you may need to do this in different sections in order for it to blend, because the paint does need to be wet. And just dry that off nice and clean. I would actually probably, if I wasn't taping this, take the minute to go and wash this off at the sink and then dry it off is what I would do. So make sure you have a nice clean dry brush. I don't want any water on it. showing you with my hand that you don't want gobs of paint on it. And I am going to go ahead now and barely touching this canvas. You don't want to press hard on the canvas, just tapping it, Bob Ross style here, just barely tapping it, brushing it in the direction that you want the paint to go. Very lightly, barely touching that surface, you're going to get that beautiful fading effect that you see right now. Make sure that you continuously dry your brush off, because if you get too much paint on the brush, this blending will not happen. You'll end up getting too much black on your orange. So make sure to keep doing that. Now, if you do make a mistake and there's something on this painting you don't like, maybe you just like, oh, this is terrible, I already don't like it. What's great about acrylic paint is you can let it to completely dry. It varies on how long it takes, but maybe 10 minutes. After the surface is completely dry, it would go ahead and it would accept you to try again just by painting on top of a dry surface. So as you can see, I'm really working now on blending all of my areas with a clean dry brush, barely tapping my canvas and keeping my circular motion. Obviously, you can't go vertical or horizontal. You'll flatten out that shape. Do lighten up on your brush. If something's not working for you, stop and think, why is that? Because usually when you can self-question yourself as an artist, you yourself can answer your own mistakes and correct them. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. It's a pretty nice background. And I'm just going to add color here and there where I want it. Just going to continue blending it. Obviously, I'm expecting you to stop this video. I'm not expecting you to keep up with me. I'm just making more of a moon shape in the background by using my orange and staying away from my yellow and my white, but you don't have to do that. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is the edges. So if you do have a canvas and you don't want to have to buy a frame, or if you don't want the edges all solid black, as you're painting, you can go ahead and color them the same color and wrap around your color. So if it's orange, you're going to do orange. If it's black, it's black. So you could do that all over the edges if you would like. All right, good job. You did your background. Now you're going to let this background dry and get ready to trace your image. Make sure your canvas is dry. So this should probably be 20 minutes later. Now there's a variety of ways that you can trace this. This is just an image I copied, and I am creating my own carbon paper by taking an oil pastel and I scribbled it on the back and I'm laying it down on top, and I'm going to just go ahead now and trace my image. There's many ways that you can get this image traced onto your canvas. One way is to authentically draw it first. So if you take a piece of paper, you can sketch out this cat and this jack-o'-lantern. I recommend doing that first unless you're really used to drawing and painting. Of course, you could just go ahead and be authentic and paint and draw this right away, but you run the risk of making a mistake and then you kind of have a mess on your background. Instead, I would draw this on a separate piece of paper and take an oil pastel, press it on the back to transfer your image onto the canvas. You could actually buy carbon paper at any art store, but in the art room, we just make our own by taking an oil pastel and shading it really dark on the back. You can also use any old pencil. It'll transfer as well. It's just that the oil pastel works better. So once you've transferred your image, however that works for you to get this image transferred over, you are going to then go ahead and paint that cat and the jack-o'-lantern black. One word of caution I would use is to make sure you're using the right brush size. When you're doing details, you need a smaller brush. When you're doing larger areas, you can switch to a fatter brush. But when you're trying to do edges, you really need a smaller paintbrush. You also need a steady hand. Don't be afraid to steady your hand on the edge of a clean, dry surface area of your canvas. I'm showing you now that I am switching to a very small paintbrush. This one's actually a little frayed. It's not the best one, but I didn't want to stop the video, so I decided to go ahead and use it. But you want a nice small brush for this detail. Okay, one word of caution is when you're doing the whiskers, make sure that you're kind of using a flicking motion, almost like a flick of your wrist, because you don't want the whiskers to look like sticks. So if you're drawing the line steady in the same width, it's going to look more like a stick. To get it to look like that whisker, then just go ahead and kind of flick it. You might want to practice that on a separate piece of paper first. But whatever happens, just let it go and be happy with it. And now we are doing the spider web. I'm just, again, using a very small detail brush and making my spider web marks. You can be playful with this and you can do your own thing with the spider web. But if you're not sure, if you just do the angled lines first and then you can fill them in with the smaller web, that works great for me. Then I'm just taking my paintbrush and I'm very carefully painting my small little spider coming down from its spider web. When you're doing detailed work, do steady your hand. Unless you're really used to painting, I like to steady my hand on the edge of a table within reach of what I'm painting, and it just allows me to guide. If you're also trying to do a straight line, keep that line continuous. You're not sketching with your paint, you're pulling the paint to create that straight line. And I'm going to take quite a bit of time to neaten it up and neaten up my edges to make sure it's nice and crisp. Remember, you're just doing the best job you can, though. It doesn't need to be perfect. You might also notice on the bottom, what did I do there? I really just did some quick swipes upward to create that, just wispy strokes upward and filled it in the black to see that it's setting on the spooky ground. And now we're ready to have some fun. My paint is still wet. And I'm going to actually just to kind of allow this to blend in. I'm going to grab some yellow and I'm going to swipe in highlights wherever I feel like it. So you can certainly feel free to copy mine, but do feel free to loosen up and just kind of swipe those highlights wherever you think will look nice on your painting. You could even do this in a different color if you wanted. You could even be using maybe violet for your highlights. So you can have fun with color if you want. Things don't need to be copied. It's fun to change things up. And I'm just adding them here and there. Our cat is in a silhouette, so our cat's eyes and nose and mouth are not going to show. Again, this reminds me of the style of art post-impressionism, where the brush strokes are showing through and the artist is not trying to blend in the brush strokes, but letting them be very vivid and be creating that principle of art movement in the work. So it almost makes it feel like things are moving when you use those brush strokes. Just showing you a close-up there of what that might look like on yours. And now we're going to zoom up on that pumpkin. And how are we going to make that pumpkin not look like it's flat? Well, we need to make it look glowing. So grab your yellow. Now I'll admit, making this video, I didn't want to wait for my pumpkin to dry. I might wait for this pumpkin to dry before I did this. However, I wanted to keep going because I had quite a few videos to make and I needed to get this done. So I would wait for that pumpkin to dry. The reason I say that is especially if you're a beginning painter, if you're grabbing any of that black, it is going to get a color that you're just not going to like. Yellow and black don't make the greatest color. Kind of makes an olive green color, and that might work in this situation. So if you don't mind mixing your paint, go right ahead. But just a word of caution, you might want to wait for that to dry. After you filled it in with yellow, just grab your orange and then do the strokes around it. You'll see mine is getting more blending of the black because, again, I didn't let it dry. If you like that post-impressionist look, of just letting your paint kind of live its own life and move together, do this on a wet pumpkin. If you want a little bit of a cleaner look, just wait for it to dry first, but you still want to outline it all in orange so the center is yellow. The reason why it's fun to use two colors when you paint is because you'll avoid things from looking flat. It gives you more of a 3D look when there's two colors. So it's balancing different values off of each other, and that's going to create depth. And just spend time on this. I'm probably using a bigger brush than I probably should. But you know what? With art, winging it, it's harmless. I mean, the worst thing that's going to happen is you're not going to like your painting. But hey, if you're enjoying painting, it's still a win. So if you get a nice painting and you enjoyed yourself, it's a win-win. If you're enjoying yourself and you don't like your painting, it's still a win. It's just not a double win-win. So sometimes just not stressing out for an hour and just relaxing with paint and having it move, you'll feel so much calmer when you're done that even if you didn't create a masterpiece, it was well worth time spent. And the more you do that, the better you're going to get anyway. Okay, so you got to practice and don't expect your first painting to be something you just are going crazy over, but do expect your first painting to be something you enjoy because it's fun. Just don't be too hard on yourself. Now I'm going back over this with yellow, and I'm not blending in my yellow too much. I kind of want it to be really nice and strong, so I'm just kind of having fun. I'm dabbing that yellow in. And your pumpkin is done now. And so the last thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to take a few white highlights. I love using white highlights on post-impressionist work. It just brings out so much movement, but you don't have to do that. I'm just going to also add just a couple swirly cues just to make this more whimsical. You don't have to add these if you don't want to. You could even make them sticks instead. I'm just adding just some real loose swirls just wherever I'm feeling it. Bringing it back into my pumpkin, just giving it that whimsical look. You do you. You do whatever you feel like down there. Oh, I forgot about the cat's paw. So I'm going to add that a little arch for that cat's paw there, sitting on the pumpkin. As you can see, I dripped a little bit of paint on my sun. That is such a bummer, and it does happen. I do have good news for you, though. If you happen to drop a little bit of paint on your dried canvas, take a paper towel, get it a little bit damp, not wet, just damp, and you should be able to pick it up. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm just taking a damp paper towel, and I'm just going to pick it up. Good enough, better than leaving a black dot. You could go back over that with paint later and really blend that mistake in so no one ever saw it. Another option is we are going to be adding white stars, so I'll probably put a white star dot right where I made that mistake to cover it up. Keep in mind, I'm expecting you to be stopping this video. I don't expect you to be keeping up with me. So you may stop this video and you can take as long as you need. Always go back and neaten up your edges. Take a step back from your painting and see if you want to add a splash of color anywhere or change a shape you don't like. I did put a little yellow dot right in the middle of my spider just to give it a little bit more 3D look. Again, I love playing with more than one color when I'm painting in post-impressionism. And lastly, just take white paint on a small paintbrush and add little stars wherever you think they should live. Bob Ross would say, just put happy little stars wherever you want. This is your world. You're the creator. So you're just going to kind of dot those anywhere you'd like. And that's it. You're done. You will see that I'm going to add my white highlights. This is optional. Like I said earlier in the video, I just love white highlights. White, just that black and white, those neutrals just seem to balance off the color. And I just love punching out my color with white. It just gives it more contrast, all the other colors. Okay, so here you see me just swiping that white. Okay, so I am just doing the finishing touches, and I hope you enjoyed painting along with me. And I hope you have something awesome to hang up and add to your Halloween decorations and have a spectacular Halloween.